Good morning. Please join me in the call to worship. Come, all who are weary of wealth, of poverty, of power, of struggle, of division. Come, all who are heavy laden, with too much, with too little, with anxiety, with fear, with sorrow. Come, all who have hope, for liberation, for justice, for mercy, for the kingdom. Let us live into these divine words. See, I am making all things new. If peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice, then let us now, in this hour, in this day, in this new year, devote ourselves to working for justice, and may that work lead us to peace in our hearts and our world. Amen. If you'll join me in the Lord's Prayer. Tender, loving God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Good morning and Happy New Year. This is the day our God has made, and I am rejoicing and glad in it. I am proud to be a part of this community and to give you a hearty Happy New Year. I love saying Happy New Year because it also is our testimony that we have lived long enough to see it, and how blessed we are for that gift indeed. I am DeWayne Davis, lead minister of Plymouth Congregational Church, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our worship celebration. Wherever you are and whenever you are viewing this broadcast, I hope the peace of God rests, rule, and abide with you, and that we find you glad to receive it, because God is indeed good and glad to give it. Oh, how I wish I could be speaking to a full house today. But indeed, as you may know, and you have heard, that the COVID situation in Hennepin County and in the wider community, and because of some of COVID affecting our staff, we are live streaming today, live streaming both services, and we are canceling this evening's Sundays at 5 service. And so I do apologize, and I am so grateful for your understanding as we come to you in this way. We are indeed blessed to do it this way, and we've got pretty good at it. And so we are pleased to come to you in this way for now. But please do make sure that you look at our website and that you get information, wait for information. We're going to be sharing information with you throughout this week about how we are responding so that we can make sure that both our community is safe and that we have the staff capacity to bring to you the programming. So do look out for email, do consult our website so that you can get any updates that we're going to be providing you about how we're moving. And some of these decisions are being made on a daily and weekly basis. And so we are responding to what is going on around us and to make sure that you are safe, but also to make sure that we can give you the information you need to participate virtually, should that be how we do it. I also just want to remind that you may have received a COVID exposure notification, especially those who attended in person on Christmas Eve. Please, if you have got that information, please read through it so that you can follow the protocols in response. You also will find out that I am the only clergy with you here today. That is because our Beth had an exposure and is quarantined. She had exposure in her family, and she is quarantining. But I can tell you, she is watching faithfully. I've been communicating with her back and forth all morning. And Seth is on vacation with his family, much-needed vacation with his family, and he goes with our prayers and blessings for much-needed rest. But we are indeed grateful to our ministers and for their work. Grateful to our staff who have really been working overtime to make sure that we can bring you our programming and our worship safely. And I feel confident that they do it with privilege and with excitement. It is challenging, but boy, we are blessed to have such a wonderful staff and really can think quick on their feet and is responsive. And so we are indeed grateful. Keep them in your prayers. Please do. Keep them in your prayers as we continue to do this work. I also just want to express gratitude for the pianist and composer David Evan Thomas, who is with us today. He gave us the prelude and will be doing the postlude, but he is a familiar presence here at Plymouth, many of his works being done by our music ministry. Thank you, David, for being with us. And now, open your hearts to receive the revelation that continues to flow from our precious and loving God. We continue in worship.
Decorations glisten far above.
A reading from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This is he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me." And from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law was indeed given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. Will you pray with me? Speak. Your servants are listening. Let these words reveal you all the more. Let the life and light that it reveals be received, be accepted. Use this weak vessel, these lips of clay, to give life, and that your people will have life in the hearing of it. Amen. So we have rung in the new year. Many people have taken down their Christmas trees and lights and are now turning their attention to returning to work and school. You've probably heard a few and made a few resolutions. And while we are winding down our celebration, I want to remind us that we remain in the season of Christmas. I'm also sure that you've heard preachers say that ever since you've been in church. But we are in the season of Christmas still. As such, it is fitting that we read this familiar prologue from the Gospel of John, both as theological scaffolding for the start of a new year and as ongoing celebration and observance of Christmas. Opening this gospel with, "In the beginning," the writer hearkens back to the creation story from the book of Genesis, with its account of God speaking into existence all there is and upholding it with the promise of newness and possibility. Yes, creation that never stops from that first utterance. And so the new year often feels like the most opportune moment for thinking about creation, about the newness and possibility of the upcoming year. At the same time, there is something profoundly meaningful in seeing this prologue, as one theologian has maintained, as a Christmas story. Yes, this text as a Christmas story without the shepherds or angels, without long journeys by camel or donkey, without a manger or even a baby, but yet a Christmas story. A Christmas story, because if we strip it down to its essence, it reinforces the promise and purpose of the baby in the manger, that God incarnates life, light, and presence as pure gift to us. Unfortunately, this is not how this text has been received and used over the years. In human hands, it has become the means by which God has been narrowed, controlled, and yes, even withheld. Oh, I know you may not know that, but that's how this text has been used too often. The words of this passage can be found in our familiar creeds and dogmas and doctrines over the years, but those creeds, dogmas, and doctrines can sometimes flatten the radicality of God's grace revealed in the Word becoming flesh in our midst. This poetic theological statement of Jesus' origin, relationship with God, and identity has too often been distorted beyond its historical context in which it was written, and etches anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism in the church, in our liturgy, in our theology. And so, yes, in our religious and theological neglect or carelessness, we have taken a theological statement, a testimony, a sermonic prologue for a people who needed to be reassured that God is always present with them, no matter where they go, no matter what age. And we've turned it into a historical sectarian claim, all too often defining who is in and who is out, who is a child of God and who is not. And while we have been drawing lines and boundaries and sometimes excluding and condemning, we miss what is truly on offer for all God's children, what is really the testimony of John. Grace upon grace, emanating from the fullness of God. Now, I got to get there. I got to make that clearer. I'm going to make it clearer. You see, in telling a story of Jesus' origin, of Jesus' relationship with God, of Jesus' identity as God's Son, the evangelist of John is telling us that God is giving the world the gift of God's eternal presence. Now, I know that went straight. Let me say it again. God is giving the world the gift of God's eternal presence. I hope that marinates a little bit. You see, just as God spoke creation into existence, God continues to speak through the Word made flesh, Jesus, a presence that came to exist as a person in time and history. So not only does Jesus manifest what God is like, but in his closeness and pre-existence with God, Jesus reveals that an abiding relationship with God is possible for all of us. Oh, see, I'm scared that you don't get the drama of that. A relationship, an abiding relationship, is possible for all of us. The assurance is that we have access to God, that we are a part of God's body, that God is the ground of our being beyond time, beyond belief, beyond birth, beyond tradition, beyond religion. And because no one has ever seen God, we may wonder if God can be perceived or comprehended or known. And here, if you don't hear anything else from me today, hear this. Yes. Yes. The good news for all is that God's abiding presence can be known, it can be felt, it can be shared. That the purpose of all of this is life and light for all, emanating from the very fullness of God. And it is eternal, it is abundant, it is overflowing, it is all gift. All gift, nothing but gift, gift heaped upon gift. No heritage, no tradition, and no status earned or given can cause God's gift to be withheld or conferred. And no creed, no dogma, and no doctrine can ever give us that gift because it comes because God made it so. I hope you are tap dancing in your home. No, I'm not naive. I know that it doesn't feel that way. Our imaginations can't reach it sometimes. I know that our theological language and religious tradition make it hard for us to comprehend the reckless abundance that God offers us, that the certainties of our creeds and traditions often overwhelm our imaginations, such that we believe that scarcity and competition are normal. But keep reading the Gospel of John, and we find people just like us who could not imagine what grace upon grace could mean or what it means to abide in the presence of God until they met Jesus. And all of those who took the time to hear, receive, and open themselves to the Word made flesh came away from the encounter knowing what it means to be connected to, in relationship with, and abiding within the eternal presence of God. That's gift heaped upon gift. But the world has trained us to reject that gift over and over. Oh, sometimes we give in to the better angels of our nature. We get glimpses of the light. When we allow ourselves to rise above the distractions, we see that divine glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. But often, it's hard to imagine. And sometimes we're unmoved by the abiding presence of life and light. No matter how God manifests God's self in every age and with each revelation, sometimes it's hard to recognize and accept the fullness of God. There are those who cannot comprehend the life and light on offer through the incarnate Word. And you know what I'm talking about because we need only look at how the masses of people respond when they are afraid or when life becomes uncertain or when they perceive that there's not enough to go around. Resentment, conspiracies, even violence abound in a world so disconnected from the gift of life and light. I was reading a Washington Post article recently which featured a story about the human susceptibility to misinformation and the persistence of conspiracy theories in our society, and how social media has amplified our divisions and suspicions of each other because we can find people to reinforce some of the most negative things we believe. We don't trust our neighbors nor our institutions, and to the extent we do trust someone, it is only those who reinforce what we already believe. One expert in response said it like this: our brains are not built for the truth. It is frightening to think that grace and truth cannot penetrate our fear, our estrangement, and our resentment. That's perhaps why we rest in our anxiety, unable to be moved by the abiding presence of God, because the truth of God's abundant love and eternal presence can be too much for us to handle, or not enough for some of us to show up differently. This state of our collective soul was dramatized in a recent movie that people have been talking about. I've been so into it, I actually joined a Zoom call of theologians to talk about the movie Don't Look Up. It's a movie about when two scientists discover that a large meteor is barreling toward Earth with enough size and velocity to result in a life extinction level event. They can't get the political and business leaders nor citizens to focus on a solution or work together to protect life. Everybody is so distracted or so acquisitive that they can't do what it would take to survive. Greed and amusement are the only ways people know how to respond to an existential threat. And there was no sense among the masses that the gift of life and light was worth protecting, or even if it mattered at all. And so the movie shows futility and emptiness and nihilism in a world known only for clawing for power, control, and immortality at the expense of neighbor, at the expense of the creation. I won't give away the ending of the movie, but you can see it's not hopeful. But there is good news in our text today. As we embrace a new year, there is good news in this testimony we read today. Jesus embodied and made real God's gift of life and light to be received and embodied in the midst of our fear and our anxiety. And so the good news is that grace and truth are comprehensible. God can be known, and life is intended to be lived abundantly. Jesus declared it, will declare it explicitly later in this gospel. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And none of that depends on creeds, doctrines, and dogmas created over the years. You'll be interested to know that this testimony of John precedes any known creed or doctrine. But none of this gift depends on that. We need not be divided nor concerned that God's love and presence are scarce, that this is a zero-sum game in competition with other faiths or no faith. We need not dismiss or discount how others find that life and light that God reveals, because it doesn't look like what we are comfortable with, or it isn't consistent with what we have received. And we need not doubt that the ongoing presence of God remains with us through it all, through grief, loss, disappointment, through victories, through failures. The fullness of God is big enough to encompass all who are open to the ways God reveals God's self. And so we should know that it is gift. It's a gift that keeps on giving. I know you've heard that. A gift that never stops. That God's intent, whether we were in first century Palestine or in 21st century USA, Europe, or Africa, God's intent is life and light and presence for all God's children. No one has ever seen God, but in the life and ministry of Jesus, in the life of our neighbors, in the fecundity of creation, we all share in the fullness of God, and we are all intimately related to God. And in it, we get a glimpse of glory, God's eternal presence, grace upon grace, gift heaped upon gift, gift that has no end because God is never depleted nor divided. Now, that's another blessed Christmas story that we can all tell throughout this new year. May it be so.
Let us join our hearts in prayer. Creator of all that is good, as we step into this new year, we are tempted to look back on 2021 and say, good riddance. And yet there was so much goodness in the year gone by, a year whose gifts we acknowledge with deep gratitude. We are grateful for the gift of a democracy that survived a vicious attack on January 6th, when courage and integrity affirmed a fair national election. We thank you for those leaders who stood fast in the face of danger and honored voters' intentions. We are grateful for the gifts of a jury system that brought justice to communities often disregarded, for First Amendment rights that allowed us to protest in the media, in town hall meetings, and on the streets, and for a renewed commitment to racial, climate, and economic justice. We are grateful for Plymouth Church. We love the tent in our parking lot that opened up opportunities for in-person worship, meetings, concerts, and youth programming. We reveled at our parking lot celebrations of Easter, Rally Sunday, Halloween, and Christmas. And we treasured the days when we were able to worship in our beautiful sanctuary, safely masked and distanced. We are grateful for the gifts of vaccines and booster shots, especially when they became available for our youth and children. We are grateful for all who made sacrifices to keep us safe. We are grateful for the gifts of our ministers and church staff. They made all that the church offered seem so smooth and easy, when behind the scenes they wrestled with decisions, pivots, uncertainty, and yes, complaints. They gave of their time and creativity to ensure we remained in community. Creator of all that is good, thank you for reminding us of the goodness in 2021. As we step into the new year, may we ever be mindful of its gifts and be grateful for all the ways your goodness is manifest. May it be so.
Beloved, as you embrace this new year, remember this part of the Christmas story, that the Word was made flesh and lived among us, that we may have life and abundantly. So all that we are, all that we have is gift, pure gift, gift heaped upon gift. All we need do is receive it. We affirm our reception of the message by reciting together our covenant. We covenant with you, O God, and one with another, and do bind ourselves in your presence to walk together in all your ways, according as you are pleased to reveal yourself in your blessed word of truth.